Welcome to Crawlspace. I'm Tim here today with Lance. Lance, how are you today?
I'm doing great today, Tim. Thanks so much for asking. I gotta say, the list of riveting guests that we've been so fortunate to have sit down with us and share their story with us on the show keeps growing longer and longer, and this one is not only no exception to that list, it's a banger of a conversation, and I think a lot of people are just going to be shaking their heads as they're listening to this person speak. But Tim, I'm shaking my head now because I have no idea how you are. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks a lot for asking. Yes, very excited to introduce this new conversation that we've recently had with Jonathan Schwartz. He was a business manager for some very famous people, including Beyonce, Mariah Carey, Alanis Morissette, Halsey, Gwyneth Paltrow, the band Linkin Park. But he developed a wild gambling habit and drug habit, and it led him to steal millions of dollars from some of these clients. The fallout was he went to prison, and he's now out of prison, and he's working for a rehab facility called Altus Rehab now, and he really just wants to share his story of highs and lows with the world at this point.
Exactly. One thing that he emphasizes in this conversation is that he's not asking for pity. He's taken full accountability for everything that he's done. Yeah, he lost everything. He lost his family. He's rebuilding his family. He still doesn't talk to certain members of his family. He lost a client base that, like you said, included Alanis Morissette and Linkin Park and Beyonce, plus the firm he worked for. He goes into prison, he comes out, and he really wants to apply this to his future self, right? He wants to go out and talk to people and identify warning signs and try to help people pull themselves out of addiction, whether it's gambling or drugs or alcohol or whatever. What became apparent in this conversation was that during the time that he was abusing drugs and gambling, he knew it was bad. So it really puts the addiction thing into perspective. The person who's addicted, who's doing these things, understands that it's bad. He even says, you had a question, and he says to you, let's just get it clear. I hated gambling. I did not like gambling. It was not something I liked doing. And that just blew my mind at that point because, like, this is a guy dropping hundreds of thousands of dollars on bets. And he's just chasing. That's another thing he says. He's just chasing that big one. And Christ, like I was getting anxiety as he's talking about it. You just start to feel for this guy because he didn't want this to happen.
Definitely something to look out for, you know, if you're into recreational gambling or even drugs. Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty extreme story about what he did. Yeah, he did mention placing like $100,000 bets, which that's a lot to gamble. Like, you know, I don't even think like high rollers are doing that too regularly. So yeah, he was deep in it, and with the drugs too. Yeah, it seems like there was only one trajectory for this to go. Seems like he kind of ended up where he needed to end up for this to stop.
Yes, absolutely. I think he'll even say it that this is what had to happen for him to stop. And, you know, the damage that was done was inevitable. It was taken to a point where the damage was never going to be not recognized. You know, he was never going to walk out of this free from addiction, no damage done without some sort of legal repercussions. He stole millions from people who put so much trust in him and put so much trust in their empires. And now he is the program director at Altus Rehab. So you can check out Altus Rehab at altus.rehab. And he wanted to, and he gives this information at the end of the episode, but he wanted us to make sure that people knew if they had any issues, they can contact him at The Real Jonathan Schwartz. That's the handle that he uses on social media. So The Real Jonathan Schwartz. If you do have a problem with gambling, with drug addiction, alcohol addiction, he's reaching out and he wants to ensure that, you know, your voice can be heard to somebody who's been through it before.
Really interested to hear what our audience thinks about this conversation. I could see this one being a little bit controversial, so feel free to weigh in the comments section on YouTube or Spotify.
All right, we're going to break real quick for commercial, and we'll be right back with Jonathan Schwartz.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program. Welcome to the podcast, Jonathan Schwartz. Jonathan, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me here.
Really great to have you here, and we are so fortunate to have someone reach out to us on your behalf to ask us if we would be interested in having you on the show, and it was a bit of a mystery. your background and reading about you and figuring out exactly where you're coming from and why you've decided to be public about your previous life. But before we get into all of that, can you introduce yourself to the audience and let them know a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you. So my name is Jonathan Schwartz. I grew up in upstate New York. I'm just going to give you a macro overview. Moved to San Francisco to enter 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. I was raised by a single mother. I have a younger brother. Moved back to New York to finish my senior year in high school, where I started, elementary school. From there, I went to 3 different colleges, moved around a lot as a child, multiple homes, because, my mother was struggling to put food on the table and a roof over my head because my father left us when I was 4. My mother was stressed. I took the brunt of a lot of that stress. I call it trauma. It's, trauma is relative to what someone experienced. I moved out. I married my high school sweetheart that I saw again when I went back to New York in high school in 12th grade. Got married when I was 24 years old. We had our first son. We moved back to San Francisco, Marin County, and raised our first child there. And it was a great place. San Francisco's beautiful. I worked in the financial district of San Francisco for a CPA firm. And that's only because my cousin, who I wanted to work for in the entertainment space, wasn't ready to hire me. He told me I was irresponsible and immature and go hone your analytical skills. And then I'll call you when you're ready. And so in 1994 or 5, he called me and he said, "You're ready to come work for me." And he was one of the brightest music minds in the entertainment business management space. I was excited to get a start working for him. I was the first one in his office, the last one to leave. I certainly did not want nepotism associated with me, so I put in the work. I got paid very little money, but I looked at it as an opportunity to learn from one of the greatest minds in business management community. So it was like going to grad school and getting paid something. And I've never been a short-term visionary. It's all about long-term vision. And so the big picture was I was learning. And ultimately in 1999, his firm was acquired by JP Morgan, or Chase Manhattan Bank at the time, now known as JP Morgan. And he asked me if I wanted to get into family wealth management, investment banking. And I said, "Cuz, I love you. Thank you for the amazing opportunity you've provided me and my wife and my older son at the time. I would like to join another business management firm." And he said, "You have my blessing." And he allowed me to take a small book of business to GSO Business Management. And I did. And from there, I just progressed in my career and ultimately became a partner and started representing some of the biggest names in Hollywood. And here I am today talking to both of you in a new profession with a beautiful outlook.
And what was that like managing some of the biggest clients going, like really famous people?
To be honest, I think part of the reason why I was able to work with so many wonderful clients is because they knew I was not enamored by them. I was not going to be a yes business manager to all their inquiries. And so I learned quickly how to say no to them and be transparent with them at this point in my career and honest about what I can provide them and if I can meet their goals. And, I'm not going to put them up on a pedestal because they're just like me and you, no different. We put our shirts on and we take a shower the same way they do. And so that really helped me procure a lot of wonderful clients. And I was blessed to have really great clients.
Is that your technique, or was that the technique that you consciously used in dealings with these celebrities? You were described as the diva whisperer. I'm wondering if that was something that you didn't realize you were doing right away. And then you realized, oh, I do have this ability to maneuver around and navigate these relationships.
The answer to that question is yes. I was called the diva whisperer, I think, because so many of my clients were women. Obviously I had many men as well. But I had a quality handful of women, and I think that's how I adopted that name for me. I was very transparent with them when I had meetings with them. When I first got my break and had call Alanis Morissette, and I'm mentioning her name because she went public with this case. Alanis was the first client that I really had an opportunity to take the meeting by myself with. And so was I nervous? Of course I was nervous. It was at that time an opportunity for me to add someone to my roster that had credibility. The irony is when I went to that meeting and she was interviewing, call it half a dozen business managers or more. And she told me the reason why she hired me was because I came with visual aids. And the visual aids were, this is what we're going to do. This is what I can do for you. Okay, you're a touring artist, you're a songwriter, and so on, and an entrepreneur. And so what I can do for you is we'll meet every month. I'll show you your personal finances, the personal budget, and when you go on tour, here's what a touring budget looks like. So here's what your guaranteed income is. Here's your expenses that we're projecting. Here's your profit margin. And it was very transparent. I was the only one that brought visual aids. And so she had on the whiteboard, like, her organizational structure. She's on the top as the CEO. Then comes the business manager. It ultimately became me. Here's her entertainment lawyer. Here's her personal manager. Here's her agent. And she really presented herself as a super intellect and incredibly smart. And we just connected because of my presentation, which was the visual aids. No one else brought visual aids. So that's how I was able to solicit, for lack of a better word, or to get the opportunity to work with her, frankly. She called me up shortly thereafter and said I was hired. And it was exciting because that was like my first, at this new firm, new client. I didn't use any manipulation at that point. I mean, I wasn't in active addiction. I was sincere. I may have been insecure and had low self-esteem, but pretended I wasn't, just based on my childhood trauma that I still had suppressed inside me for 46 years of my life. I'm 55 now, and I've been able to work on all that. But after that, the biggest break I had, aside from Alanis, was in 2000. A band named Linkin Park was looking for business management, and their manager referred the client to what became my partner, Mr. Michael Oppenheim. And may he rest in peace. He passed away over a year and a half ago. He became my mentor, and so we took the meeting together with many of the band members. And they loved the fact that I was the young guy, if you will, and Michael was sort of the older guy. There was a really nice combination between us, and they hired us. And then ultimately it was put on my desk, and I was the primary partner responsible for them. That was, I would say, the crossroad of my career. The path led just really upward once I retained Linkin Park, because they became such a success at a rapid speed that I've never seen in the music business. I mean, they were just a new artist, right? Business managers take chances with new artists, especially when it comes from a credible referral source, whether it's an agent, manager, or lawyer. You take some chances, because obviously there are artists that all start out as a baby band or a baby artist, and eventually, if they're lucky, they become, I use the terms from my time in the business, platinum artists, performing at arenas and so on and so forth. And that's what Linkin Park did. Like, right out of the box, they sold, I believe, and I could be wrong, over 20 million at this point albums in their first decade. Most, I believe, at that time ever done. So now I'm starting to get calls from agents, lawyers, managers saying, hey, we want to work with you. We see what you've done for Linkin Park. And I want to be careful when I say what I've done. Two things I want to talk about there. I didn't do this myself, right? I had a whole team there that worked for me and my partners. We had 75 plus employees. Without them, I couldn't do anything. The truth is, Linkin Park, they handled their business as a business. I often say they were not about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? You remember that era in the music business. I remember going on their tour bus to meet them and talk to them about their financial affairs. And I walked in and they're playing video games on a tour bus. And I'm like, what is this? This isn't sex, drugs, and rock and roll. These are a bunch of nerds. But that's who they are. They're brilliant people, and they're family men. I just learned so much from them because they had such high expectations of how they wanted a business manager and the scope of responsibilities to help them. And they taught me a lot. I'm glad that today they have a new singer that replaced Chester Bennington. May he rest in peace. He died in July of 2017, and I miss him as well dearly. And so Chester was replaced. The band apparently is doing really well. And again, everybody's replaceable, as evidenced by the fact that all my former clients are doing incredibly well with a new business manager.
So how long were you working with Alanis and Linkin Park and some of these other high-profile clients where it was good?
My active addiction didn't start until about 2010. So Linkin Park, I had 10 years pre-active addiction with them. Alanis, similar amount of time. And then again, I started to acquire, more and more really A-list clients. Beyonce, Mariah Carey, Gwyneth Paltrow, some of the biggest artists in the world, some professional athletes. And I didn't feel that I was on top of the world because in 2010, when my active addiction started, which also included starting criminal behavior, I couldn't look at myself in the mirror and say, oh, I'm so proud of you, Jonathan. Like, I knew what I was starting to do was wrong. I knew I was starting to violate my fiduciary responsibility to these clients in the sense that, I started to quote unquote borrow money from my first client, which it translates to stealing money because I never paid it back until I got caught. I really wasn't really my authentic self during the act of addiction. But before the act of addiction, I thought I was a very good business manager. I basically had a moral compass and integrity during that period of time until I didn't, starting in 2010. And I let a lot of people down. I let my direct victims, the 5 or 6 direct victims of embezzling money to fuel my gambling addiction, and then ultimately my cocaine and other drug addictions. And I had the money myself. I made 7+ figures a year. Money didn't bring me happiness. I could have taken the money from my bank account instead of borrowing quote unquote money the first week from Alanis, which led to week number 2, week number 3, month 7, year 3, just progressively just getting out of control, living in insanity and living in fear that inevitably I would get caught. And inevitably, thank God I did get caught because, I had a lot of suicidal ideation toward the tail end of my 6-year gambling run. I wish I would have asked for help earlier. And unfortunately, I did not, because when I grew up, it was viewed primarily as a weakness to ask for help. Whereas today, I am a firm advocate for men and women and children, anybody who's struggling to ask for help. And I didn't have that courage. So I want to help people learn to have that courage to be vulnerable and ask for help.
Yeah, it's a really brave stance that you take as you've entered into this phase of your life. But if you don't mind going back to your early days in the act of addiction, how did that start? And when did you realize gambling was, I guess, your gateway addiction?
So I had a little experience with gambling in college. I had this called a 2-week period where I thought that I and my fraternity brother would become bookies, right? Because bookies win. They balance out the bets. They know their vig regardless. They don't really care who wins. So I'm like, let's do this. And so because I grew up poor, so I didn't have money like my college peers and my fraternity brothers did. And I wanted to, hang out with them and enjoy the fraternity scene with them and, be a little social butterfly. And so I decided to ask a fraternity brother if he would be open to us two starting, call it a bookie business. So we did for 2 weeks. We lost $10,000, and 5 of it was my responsibility. 5 of it was his. And I'm like, I don't have $5,000. What am I going to do? So that was the start of my first real poor choice in life, because I called up my mother and I said, hey, can I move to San Francisco, where she was at the time? This was a school in New York called SUNY Albany. So I left SUNY Albany, finished my last year and a half at San Francisco State, earned my bachelor's in accounting, but I abandoned my fraternity brother. He had to roll up his sleeves and take multiple jobs to pay off his share and ultimately my share. I didn't identify as a compulsive gambler at that point because that was a short period of time. I thought I would be over with it. I'm not going to gamble anymore. And what happened was I moved down to LA in 1994 and 5, as I mentioned earlier, to work for my cousin. And somewhere about a year after starting there, or 2, I started to place some bets with my cousin's partner. And I lost $3,000 there. And I didn't have the money either. So my cousin's partner agreed to pay for it. And then I was pretty abstinent from gambling until about 2010, when I was coaching my kids in youth sports in the community of Agoura Hills, California, where we lived and where they were raised. So I have 3 adult sons now, but at that time they were 3 young sons. And I had the privilege of, coaching their youth sports. And this assistant coach in baseball approached me and he said, do you gamble? Like, do you want to bet on sports? And I said, sure, why not? So I started betting a $50 bet or a $100 bet. And all of a sudden I'm hooked, right? And that was the start of my compulsive gambling journey. And instead of $50 bets, $100 bets, I'm betting every day for 6 years on sports, the NFL, college football, NBA, college basketball, baseball. And literally when I say every day, and I don't like to use absolutes, but I would say every day for 6 years, I called the bookie a minimum of one time a day, sometimes multiple times. And these bets became, a $100,000 bet or, $250,000 on a Saturday because I've got every football game on the board, college. And it's not just now betting the spread, who's going to win or lose. It's betting teasers and parlays and totals. I was a real degenerate and nobody knew this dark secret. I didn't have to. I chose to keep this a secret that not my wife at the time knew, not my kids, not my best friends, not my partners, not my employees. I shared with nobody because I knew inevitably I'm going to get caught. And I didn't want anyone to be considered a co-conspirator in my white-collar criminal behavior. And the sad part is, as I said earlier, had I asked someone for help, I would have received it. And unfortunately, I didn't. And so ultimately, here I am, if you want me to fast forward to how I got caught. But that sort of started my compulsive gambling. And I'll just say this part. At the end of my gambling run, I experienced a lot of suicidal ideation. I mean, for 6 years, every night I'm living in fear when I hear a siren. When I'm walking down the street and I hear a siren, I look over my shoulders. Am I caught? Has the FBI been listening on the phone to my calls with my bookie? And has the FBI been listening to my calls every Tuesday or Monday to the bank saying client A wants this much money, deliver it to me at the office so I could pay my bookie in the garage where my office was every Tuesday? Every Sunday night after the last NFL game, first of all, I can't sleep at all. I'm on sleeping aids. That Sunday, I really can't sleep because I'm thinking in my head, I'm like concocting some BS lie. I'm going to call the private banker and say, client A needs this much money. And they ask me why. And now I've got to come up with a story. Oh, because she's making improvements at her house and she wants to pay the contractor, under the table. I can't tell you how many lies could you just imagine how many lies I had to come up with over this 6 year period. And so I couldn't live with myself. A lot of people report like, how could a guy like myself say what I'm about to say and actually mean it? The truth is I really did care about my clients. The truth is I really wanted to pay them back. And I know it sounds weird, but I did care about them, and they were great people. And what I can say for sure that's not weird is that they all didn't deserve what I did to them. And I hurt a lot of people. But during that end of that 6 year run, I started to really have strong, intense, high-frequency suicidal ideation. And I really wanted to hurt myself, to kill myself, because I couldn't take it. I couldn't take it for myself, the pain that I was going through and holding in not only my trauma for so long, but also holding in this now, white collar criminal behavior, not being emotionally present for my kids when I'm coaching them now, when I'm looking at the phone at scores to see if I'm winning or losing. I just couldn't take all this stuff and this pain that I put on myself. And that's why in active addiction, we most people tend, like I did, to self-sabotage. So despite self-sabotaging and not being willing to ask for help, I really thought about killing myself. And thankfully, during those times, I was able to identify really solid reasons to live. At the time, my 3 beautiful sons, my wife, my mother, my stepfather, and even my younger brother, who I don't have a great relationship with today because he, like many people, I hurt. And he's still working through that. And I'm giving him the space. And I hope one day we can have a lovely brotherly relationship. That's how my compulsive gambling and my addiction to drugs started and where it ended.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsor.
And a thank you to our sponsors. Back to the program.
Now, with the gambling and the bigger bets, were you hoping to get out at some point if you had hit a big bet?
Yes, I did not like gambling. I hated it, in fact. I was now chasing. I got to chase this. This is the mindset of a compulsive gambler. It's the grandiosity, the fantasy that, oh, we're going to win. We're going to have that one day where I win $7 million back, right? With such irrational thinking. But that's the mindset that I had and most compulsive gamblers have. And the idea was, I'm going to win it back and I'm going to pay them back before anybody knows. And I'm going to be able to move on with my career, with my beautiful family, my partners. I won't damage the reputation of GSO Business Management. I won't damage my clients. I won't damage the industry as a whole. But I didn't pay them back until at the very end, there was a settlement reached and all the 5 or 6 clients were paid back in full, which of course the media didn't present when this story came out.
What is it like for you now, seeing the rise of legal sports betting? Is it challenging to stay away now?
No. So in May of in the next month or so, I'll be 9 years sober and abstinent. So abstinent from gambling and drugs. When I came home out of prison in 2020, I reunited with my peers in the Gamblers Anonymous community. And I became the secretary for Gamblers Anonymous in Los Angeles Intergroup. I became the co-chairman, each for a year commitment. I recently just ended my commitment at my home group in Westlake Village, California for Gamblers Anonymous on Tuesday nights. I sponsor people. I'm very active in Gamblers Anonymous. We'll get more into, when we talk about where I am today, how I help people struggling with addiction and trauma. When I came home, I tested myself and I started watching sports and it didn't trigger me. And the reason why I knew it didn't trigger me is because when I was gambling, I created a room in my house. I called it the sports room. We had TVs all over. Why? So I could watch multiple games going on. My kids could play video games in that room if they wanted one of the TVs. And I'm immersed from the very first kickoff of a football game to the last game at night. I'm immersed. And when my kids are there and my wife is there, I'm cringing inside, but I can't show them how, because I know I'm losing for today, right? Today, I can have sports on. In fact, I watch Netflix more than I watch sports. I still enjoy sports, but I can have it on in the background and not be immersed in what's going on. So I'm at a healthy place with myself that I could watch sports, but I'm not really into investing most of my time on watching TV as it relates to sports. I mean, when the Yankees beat the Boston Red Sox this year, coming up in the postseason and go to the World Series.
I don't know if you're aware of all the signings that the Red Sox have recently made.
Here's this fantasy again that I have in my head going on. So to answer your question, yes, I could watch sports today. I don't have any cravings to do drugs. I'm human, and the program that I'm in, the 12-step program, it's one day at a time. And, I could wake up, I'm not promised tomorrow to be sober, but I know that I work a very strong program. And when I wake up, I'm grateful, like today, that I don't have, the desire to snort cocaine or to gamble. It's just, I'm a nerd. Today, I'm a really proud nerd. And I say that so sincerely. Like, I'm so risk adverse today. There's no shot. I know the negative consequences if I were to relapse. And I'm not willing to risk that.
Again, you coming on a platform like this to talk about it is really a brave thing. What was it like back right around the time where you knew that everything was kind of closing in on you and the reality of prison started to become more apparent to you? What was that moment like?
Yeah, well, there were a few of those moments, and some of those moments, I was still in denial. So I was in Tampa Bay, Florida, with Beyonce as she was preparing and rehearsing for her Lemonade tour. And I think that was like in 2015. And then I received a call from my former partners saying that they got a call. So Alanis fired me in the fourth quarter 2015, handed over the books. I was careless intentionally when I handed over the books to the business manager. And I was hoping to get caught because I still didn't have the courage to ask for help. So I didn't doctor up the financials. I just said, basically one line item on the financial statement saying $4.6 million cash withdrawals. Inevitably, I knew I was going to get caught at that moment, but I actually wanted to. And by the way, the irony behind the business manager that she hired, that was my cousin who she hired and worked with his partner. So this will make a great scene in my movie and a great chapter in the book, but the details are pretty ironic, right? So Howard, my cousin's partner, called me and said, what happened with this $4.6 million? Well, they called my partners at first, and they called me when I was on tour in Tampa Bay. Now I could feel somatically that I'm going to collapse and like this is the end of the world. And so at this time, I'm still in active addiction. My default was to continue with my dishonesty and manipulation. So I told my partners, don't worry about it. Like she used this money for investing in a cannabis business. This isn't true, but this is the lie in that moment that I said, because for those 6 years, all I did was lie to the banks, lie to my clients' faces, lie to my partners, lie to everybody, including myself, as a character trait that most people have in addiction. I don't use that excuse. I want to be clear. I didn't say that. I don't use my trauma. I don't use the addiction as an excuse for my poor choices. I want people to know I take full responsibility for the people that I hurt because of my poor choices. And I own it. And part of what I do today is advocate for recovery and addiction, and I advocate for personal accountability. And I'm modeling that and that's why I like coming on your podcast, so that I can say that and sincerely mean that. Like, I'm the one, regardless of the contributing factors and the evidence-based literature that supports, if you experience these childhood experiences, you'll likely, carry that into adolescence and adulthood. Yeah, that's true. But you'll never hear me make an excuse. I own it. And that's really important for me to own it. And so now I lie to them, and now I have to fly back from Tampa Bay to LA to meet with my partners. And I continue to lie to them. But what I did say to them during that meeting was, hey, if you don't believe me, I'll take a lie detector test. Like, why would I even say that, right? So now I'm celebrating in Santa Barbara, this beautiful hotel with my wife, our 23-year anniversary. I get a call from my former partner saying, hey, we want you to come down to Beverly Hills, which is about an hour and a half from Santa Barbara, and we want you to meet with one of the former FBI agents' best, polygrapher. I'm like, sure, no problem. Still high ego, still high self-esteem, presenting outwardly to the world, but inside I'm scared, insecure, low self-esteem, right? So I'm living this double life this whole time. Like, I'm miserable inside. That's why the money didn't matter to me. And I'm miserable, but I'm presenting to the outside world that I'm this huge, successful business manager with a white picket fence house, everything that people would want, but I'm miserable. And so now I'm doing cocaine in the hotel room when I get this call, and I'm high. And so I said, okay, I'll come down. Now that was the moment I actually had to tell my wife the truth, because I had to tell her why I'm going to leave tomorrow morning to go take a lie detector test. But you don't worry, honey, I'll beat it. I'm going to Google how to beat this lie detector test. I'm sorry for all the things that I've been doing and lying for 6+ years. And she was incredibly supportive in that moment, right? She was probably just in shock. In fact, she was in shock. And so I told her, I'm up all night doing cocaine. That morning, when I leave, I say, honey, I'll be back. Go to the spa. Enjoy yourself. Like, this is how arrogant I was, right? And so overconfident I was. I'll be back. And so I drive to Santa Barbara. On the way to Santa Barbara, I've made sure that I brought so much cocaine with me that I'm snorting cocaine the entire hour and a half. And I'm going to take a lie detector test. And I'm placing my last bet. This date was May 8th, 2016, because May 9th, 2016 is my sober birthday date. And so here I am doing all this. There's no shot of someone on a stimulant like cocaine that someone's going to pass a lie detector test. But I certainly thought I could, because I'm a big shot, right? I'm a big shot. So here I am. I walk into the polygrapher's office. I immediately enter with so much arrogance. I put my feet up on his desk. I'm so disrespectful. I'm so high. I like a big shot. I put my feet up and my back, and I'm like, hey, what do you want to talk about? Let's get this thing going. I didn't realize, because I thought this guy started to like me. Like, we're talking for 2 hours. And I didn't realize that that's a strategy used by polygraphers. They want to establish a rapport. And that's what he was trying to do. And here I am thinking, this guy loves me. This cocaine's great. Maybe I can go to the bathroom and do some more cocaine. And I didn't, but maybe I could have. Ultimately, he attaches all the gizmos on my chest and head and wherever he put it. And, I'm thinking I beat this test. The moment that he asked me the question, did you steal from Alanis? And I say no. I knew for a fact the test was reading, what a schmuck, he's lying, But when I left there, I actually thought in my mind, I'm like, I beat it. So I drive back to Santa Barbara. My wife asked me how it went. I said, it went great. Call my attorney. He didn't pick up. All of a sudden, I realized that my computer access to the firm has now been cut off. So now that's odd, right? So I call my assistant and I say, is your computer working? And she says, yes. So moments after that, my attorney, Nathan Hochman at the time, who's now the Los Angeles district attorney, he said, Jonathan, you failed that test worse than anybody in this former FBI agent's as a polygrapher career. I said, oh shit. And what happens next? Like, now that's that moment I'm really scared. And I could have faced 23 years in prison according to the sentencing guidelines. And so now my suicidal ideation, of course, comes back. But now I've got to regroup with my wife, and we've got to go meet Nathan in his office, and we've got to tell our children, because they're going to find this out on TMZ tomorrow. They're going to find this out in every magazine, that The Hollywood Reporter, Variety, Forbes, Wall Street Journal. All these media outlets, of course, grabbed this opportunity to talk about the degenerate Jonathan Schwartz, who embezzled $7 million from clients. And that was hard. It was hard to talk to my kids. It was hard to tell them. Certainly I was embarrassed. And, to this day, I'm still repairing my relationships with 2 of my boys. And, there's so much we can talk about where I am today. But at that moment, to answer your question, those were the crossroads where I knew I was inevitably going to get caught, that I got caught.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program.
I have such secondary anxiety for you in that moment. I mean, just presenting that moment where you throw your feet up on the desk, because you're just so confident and self-assured that you're going to pass it. And not only did you not pass it, you failed worse than anybody. I mean, it's just such a little micro metaphor for the entirety of your existence for those years, is that you hit the highest of highs, but you just crashed as low as possible. But again, you've come back from it, which is exactly why we like to do these shows, to show people that there are lots of things that go into decision making, and you become addicted to drugs or gambling or sex or something like that. And the reasons are the reasons, but anybody, if they have the right emotional tool belt, can figure out a way to come back. You know what I mean? I think you're a good spokesperson for that.
Thank you. And that's why, I want to be a combination between a Tony Robbins and a Jordan Belfort, but meet them in the middle, because I want to go around and tour the world, after the book comes out and a movie, and really help people like myself that struggled with addiction and trauma not make the same mistakes that I made. And this is what brings me so much joy today, despite still having, challenges every day. But, now I don't play the woo me victim role in those challenges. And I accept every challenge and view every challenge as an opportunity, and try and model how to overcome our challenges. It wasn't easy to reintegrate into society when I was released from prison in 2020. I couldn't get a job. I'm a felon. I have no money. And I took a job because I needed some more humility, working at Dunkin' Donuts. I got fired there after 2 to 3 months because I wasn't cleaning the floors well, and I wasn't cleaning the countertop well. Then I got another job as an auto salesperson, and I was a terrible auto salesperson. I got my license from there was revoked as an auto salesperson. So now here I am. What am I going to do? And I always knew that moment I got caught, that I wanted to have a book out and I wanted to have a movie, but I didn't know what I wanted to do for a career before that materialized. And there was no guarantee that that was going to materialize by then. So I decided to go to addiction studies school online. Now this is during COVID. And I got my CADAC, which is, certified alcohol drug counselor. And then I decided, let me go to grad school to become an LMFT, a licensed marriage and family therapist, with an emphasis in addiction and trauma. So that's what I did. And, here I am today as a therapist and a program director at Altus Rehab. I also work providing teletherapy at the Chabad Treatment Center in LA, which is a Medi-Cal facility for men. I'm blessed. I help people every day. And we'll talk more about that. I'm sorry. I love to talk, as you could tell. I apologize.
Yeah, no apology necessary. I definitely want to get into Altus Rehab and your role there very soon. But I just want to ask real quick about prison. What was that experience like?
Yeah. So I'm going to preface that by saying I believe today in crying. That crying is such a cathartic intervention to start learning how to connect with your emotions. And so when I surrendered on July 11th, 2017 to prison, I was first, when you check in, you're kind of put in this cell, call it a holding cell, until they, process all your paperwork and you get that wonderful, beautiful mug shot and all the things that you see in the movies. And then I'm scared because am I going to stay in this cell now? And are they going to take their sweet time to process this? Or is it going to take 2 weeks, 3 weeks that I'm going to be in this like small little cell? But I was fortunate enough, for lack of a better word, to be given my green uniform and my orange Crocs and walk from the detention center down to the federal prison camp at Sheridan, Oregon. And that's when about 400 plus inmates all every day look to see who's coming down, who's the new inmate, and they easily identifiable because I'm wearing orange Crocs. And those are the Crocs I was given and everyone's given until they can afford to go to the commissary and get a pair of shoes. And or some nice inmate comes up to you and brings you a pair of shoes and a toothbrush and soap. And I cried for six months. I was scared. I looked at 72 months multiple times a day and says, okay, now 72 months is how many days? And okay, I have 1 day left. And I did that for 6 whole months. And then I've made some really good friends in prison. I talked to about 5 of them today. And one of them approached me and he said, I knew you were coming. We had the same prison consultant, that helped me understand what I was about to embark upon. And he had the same one. So this prison consultant contacted this person's wife. And so when she visited him, she told him that I was coming. And so he was on the lookout for me. He took me under his wings. He helped me settle in. He eventually said, you got to stop crying, man. You got to grow up. Like, you cannot look at the calendar every day and think you're getting out because you're going to drive yourself crazy. And that's what I did. It wasn't until 6 months into my sentence that I stopped counting. And then what we did was we counted Super Bowls. All right, I've got 3+ Super Bowls here, And so that made it a little bit easier to tolerate. It's hard because I have the A-type personality and I was not allowed to contact my younger son's school and see how he was doing. I wasn't, my wife didn't, my ex-wife at that point now, didn't have to tell me how he's doing, health-wise. So now I worry about my kids, even though they're, 2 of them are adults and the youngest one is in middle school. I have no control over decision-making for them. And that's hard. That was hard for me. I mean, my kids were my best friend. So my experience there was tough. I broke these 2 knuckles because I was so excited playing softball one day. I'm pretty much very competitive when it comes to sports, kind of like the Yankees are, not the Red Sox. I'm very competitive.
All these shots.
Only because Tim's wearing the Boston Red Sox hat.
It does bring out something in most people.
I've got to have that New York arrogance a little bit. So I break my knuckles because I cross home plate and we win. And I punched the bench, not knowing that the portion of the bench that I punched had this metal rod. So, of course, when you go to the medical office and see a quasi-doctor, their response is, let's just go out to the track and drink some water. So this will stay the way it's going to stay. So this is like my prison like tattoo, but it's not a tattoo. And then I had a concussion once where I was taken to the hospital because a softball hit me in the head and everyone in the camp heard it. I had some really tough experiences there, but at the end of the day, I deserved to be in prison. And I made some really great friends, as I said earlier. And I had a great job in prison. I worked in education, gave people access to the computers. I taught classes at night on accounting and financial management. I taught a very important program that's near and dear to me. It's called the Victim Impact Program, where inmates every 7 weeks can elect voluntarily to participate. And then the CO in charge of that program and I sit and say, okay, let's take these 9 guys. It's about helping inmates take responsibility and identify the victims of their poor choices. Some of the white collar guys would accept that maybe after week 2. The drug dealers wouldn't accept that. And so what I asked the drug dealers, knowing that they were not going to accept that they have victims, is you did have victims. You don't know if the person you sold drugs to became addicted and died of an overdose. You don't know how that affected their families, because like me and like most people in addiction, our poor choices doesn't just hurt ourselves. Sure, mine also hurt my clients and all that. They're not dismissing that. It was awful. But it also ruptured my family dynamics, right? My wife asked for a divorce. I embarrassed everybody. All the money that I had was gone. My wife had to find a job to pay for our kids. And my mother helped her out and my brother helped her out. And that's great. But I ruptured the family dynamics. My kids have trauma from that. And so these drug dealers, I wanted to encourage, their answer was, many of them was, well, if I didn't sell them drugs, someone else would have sold them drugs. Okay, that's true. But what's also true is you did sell them drugs. Now I can see their progress. I'm on the phone. And prior to this, let's just say this person, these drug dealers in this class, victim impact class, they're on the phone cursing out their girlfriend who's raising the kids or their wife. Now, after a few weeks of this program, you're hearing them say, I'm sorry. I love you. I'm really happy and thankful and grateful that you're helping raise our children. That was super rewarding for me in prison. One of the jobs I had was working in the multi-purpose room where the COs eat. And only about 6 or 7 inmates of 400 plus inmates are allowed to go up there. You have to get approved. The moment I walked in there, and I can't make this up, the first time I walked in there and I looked to the TV, there's MTV playing Alanis' song Ironic. Like if that's not a message from my higher power that who put that up there for me to say, okay, here's a reminder of why you're here. I needed to be in prison, as I said earlier. I needed time to reflect on my poor choices. I needed to rehabilitate. I hurt people. Those were the consequences. And I was grateful that I was let out a little early because of COVID. I have coronary artery disease. And so I was released about 6 to 9 months earlier. I did 16 months of home confinement. That was very difficult. And then I served 3 years of probation afterwards. So I've given the government over 9 years of my time. And I'm now off probation, and I'm still paying my monthly restitution. I owe $8.65 million in restitution because of the $7 million that I embezzled. And my former partners had to pay, call it $1.65 million to hire a forensic accountant to pay for lawyers, in their case against me, and to pay some staff that likely had to be laid off because I hurt the reputation of GSO business management. So that's my experience in prison. I mean, I went on Con Air. I asked to be transferred from Sheridan, Oregon after I completed the residential drug and alcohol program, which took a year off my sentence. And I requested a transfer, which I got to Taft, which is in California. It at the time was the only federal prison camp that was private, not governed by the Bureau of Prisons. But I take this lovely trip on Con Air where I'm shackled, and now it's not just campers, it's inmates from all security levels. So you had some really intense people on that. Was flown to Nevada and went to Pahrump, which is in Nevada near Las Vegas. It's a detention center, and that's sort of the hub where they start transferring inmates out to their destination. I had to wait a month and a half. And I thought I was going to be able to leave in 2 days. That was not fun. There were fights between races. and I kept my head down. But ultimately, when I got to Taft, I was able to stay there for 9 months because the government was going to close that camp because they didn't want any more private facilities. So I was fortunate enough, due to the Aleph Institute, which is a Jewish institute, which is the largest nonprofit organization that has the best relationship with Bureau of Prisons, and they advocated for Jewish inmates. And they were able to get me released early because of my coronary artery disease. When I say early, April 16th, 2000 was my release date. On April 17th, 2000, all of those inmates still there were moved to medium security facilities across the United States, and they remained there for a very long time. So, I'm blessed. I'm grateful for some of these things that I did experience.
How much did you learn about your current role while you were in prison?
I didn't learn anything in prison in terms of education. I wanted to go to see if I could take grad school courses and whatnot, but they don't really have a good education system there. Like where I was in Sheridan, you have the ability to get your commercial driver's license, and they teach you how to do that there. Some people took some classes, but not at the grad school level. So, and even if I could take it, I couldn't afford it. I didn't have knowledge that I learned and acquired there that I could apply to my former career. However, experience is having experience combined with academia. And maybe I didn't certainly have the academia at when I left prison and entered grad school in addiction studies, but I had the experience, and that's invaluable. So I'm fortunate enough today, I can apply both the academia from grad school in addiction studies along with my experience to really help people. And as a therapist at Altus Rehab and a program director, the clinical part of that is when I sit down and meet with a client in therapy session one of the biggest challenges therapists have is developing a therapeutic alliance, a rapport, and earning the client's trust. I, for the most part, earn that in session one because therapists should not self-disclose unless they believe their self-disclosure can help the client. And in my case, my self-disclosure can help the clients. My experience with addiction, my experience with poor choices, my experience with hurting the family and loved ones, right? That's very common. And that's what's so beautiful about addiction and the 12-step rooms is the commonality that exists in this mind of mine, and theirs is very similar. We have different content lines, but many of them have had childhood trauma. Many of them have had PTSD or other. And so I can establish a really good rapport with them. And that's what I do today at Altus Rehab. I have some program director responsibilities. I get to walk in there every morning and ask the clients how they're doing. And if they want to talk to me, I'm here for them. I get to have sessions with them and I get to see their progress. But I'm also a sponsor. I sponsor a lot of people. And what was hard for me in the beginning of work, and I want to just say at Altus Rehab, I started working there 2 years ago. The owner, Janelle, CEO owner, gave me a felon. That's still my title today. I am a felon. And she gave me a chance. I was very transparent. Today, I'm very transparent. I'm very honest, as you can see here. I'm very authentic, as you can see here. This is my story. This is who I was, and this is who I am. And she took a chance on me and hired me as a case manager. And then she gave me an opportunity March of last year to become a program director and to allow me to give therapy out once I got my AMFT registration number. I'm indebted to her. And the reason why not only did I apply there and ultimately decide to stay there, if I could have looked for other places, is she creates this culture at the treatment center, which is a client-centered approach. Clients come first. It's not about the profit. It's clients come first. This is how we serve them. This is the culture at Altus Rehab. Everyone that walks in this door is family. And I love working there. I can't help everybody. And that's what I learned too as a sponsor. I don't take credit when a sponsor has a strong recovery program and can maintain his recovery. It's a one day at a time program, but nor do I take responsibility if a sponsee relapses. Right. So I don't take the credit when they're succeeding, but I also don't take the responsibility if they relapse. And that's the same thing as a therapist. I try really hard to give the clients the tools so that when they leave Altus Rehab, they have a strong aftercare plan. When they leave here, they relapse, I can't take responsibility for that. I mean, when I say I can't, I choose not to. Am I sad to hear they relapse? Of course. Do I want them to come back? Yes. I can't help everybody as much as I want to.
So you did mention that you're working on a book, or you worked on a book, and you mentioned movie, but I'm just wondering what's on the horizon. I'm getting some good vibes here from you, that there's like good things coming and you feel very blessed about what's been going on post-prison.
I never want to leave Altus, and I never want to stop working at Chabad Treatment Center. But my primary passion, aside from those two organizations, is to tour the world and like I said, and to be an advocate for personal accountability, to help educate people with financial literacy. I want celebrities to learn what they need to look for in a business manager and what a business manager should have, and that a business manager should provide source documents. That's why I didn't get caught early in my criminal behavior, because not a single client asked me for a source document, like a bank statement, to reconcile with the spreadsheets that I created. So I'm going to talk about financial literacy. I'm going to help people understand the things that they need to ask for, and don't trust someone so quickly like I was trusted so quickly. And I also want to talk about people in addiction and recovery. I've got a lot of positive messages that I want to spread to the world. That the book is going to be very detailed. It's going to disrupt the entertainment space. It's going to tell the truth about, how the entertainment space operates, because the outside world, I'm not naive. I know nobody really cares about Jonathan Schwartz, but because I had, one of the top books of business, just because of my clients, not because of me, I can use my clients to market, my former clients to market my book and to market the movie. I'm not going to talk bad about any clients. They don't deserve that. I'm just going to tell the truth. And there's a lot of things happening in the entertainment space that people need to know. And I will disrupt it respectfully. I'm not going to do it from an ego perspective. I have humility today. I have a healthy version of low ego today. I have a healthy version of self-esteem today. I have a healthy version of self-worth today. And it's all dictated by my higher power, which is my God, and also, the humility. I needed to learn humility. And today I sit here in front of you both with a great deal of gratitude to be here, a great deal of gratitude, and feel blessed despite all the challenges I have. I can be who I am today. Like, I don't have to live that double life anymore. I don't have to live in this pseudo self, this fake self that I lived for so many years of my life, so many decades. I can live today in my authentic self. And I'm proud of who I've become. And I'm proud of who I'm becoming. And again, I say that with humility. I know many people don't like me or don't want to give me a second chance. I accept that. I'm no longer a people pleaser. I know how to set boundaries with people. And that's what you learn in recovery, amongst many other tools.
We've had a string of really great conversations with a bunch of guests, and this is just one more great conversation that we've had with a guest who just has a remarkable story, and you've come through so much.
Thank you.
If you don't mind me asking, how is the personal life going? Are you in communication with your family? I know you said that there's some strained relationships, but how are you navigating that?
So my younger son goes to college and he's studying abroad. So on Monday, I am flying to Spain. It's my first trip in 10 years on a plane, other than for a day going to Florida or Chicago. This is my first trip. I'm sort of like still in shock that I'm going to be leaving the country and visiting my son in Spain, where he's studying abroad. I can't wait, because today I get to be emotionally present in front of my children, and in this case, my younger son. And I have a supportive boss who's letting me go. I'm grateful for that. My middle son, he's 29. He lives in Texas. And at this point in his life, he's not ready to have a relationship with me. But I can accept that because I hurt him, and he's an adult. He knows Dad loves him, that I love him so much. I ask every day my higher power to bring him back into my life, and I trust that my higher power will bring him back in my life when it's supposed to be. I miss him every day. I still cry today. I cry, even talking about this right now, there are tears that come to my eyes because I miss him. My older son and I, we have a relationship where he lives here in Marina del Rey. He's 31. Both of them have great jobs and great careers. And the most important thing is I know that they're healthy and they're thriving in their respective careers. And that's truly what makes me happy. Selfishly, I want to see them. But when they're ready, they'll come to me. And like my older son and I, we speak maybe 4 times a year. We go have lunch, or I think we're going to go on a hike. And when I get back from seeing his younger brother and my youngest son, he doesn't call me dad. He calls me Jonathan. That hurts. But again, my kids have the right to feel the way they feel. I hurt them. I embarrass them so much. And I hope one day my kids will realize that I'm not trying to earn back anybody's trust through the words that come out of my mouth, because I can understand how they can still be skeptical. Is dad still this dishonest person? Is dad still the person who manipulated so many people? I don't expect them to, nor do I want anybody, frankly, to trust me through the words of my mouth. I want you to observe my actions on a daily basis, and that's how I hope to earn back the trust of people.
Well, amazing stuff. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Jonathan. We really appreciate your time and you telling your story to our listeners. And we will make sure to put a link to Altus Rehab in the show notes. Is there anything else you'd like to say here today?
Thank you. And really thank you both for having me. It is truly, I know people use this word as a cliche, but it's really been an honor to be on your podcast. And I really am blessed and grateful that you gave me this opportunity and platform. If you don't mind, if you could just share my professional Instagram. So in case people want help, they can message me on my Instagram account, and they could watch your podcast once it's ready, where I'll post it. It's called The Real Jonathan Schwartz. Thank you both so much.